Under Plum Lake by Lionel Davidson. 7. Where do we go? Dreaming. I knew it. It was 3 o'clock in the morning and I was dreaming. My mother hadn't wakened me to ask about the flashlight. I hadn't gone backwards out of the window or down a cliff in the middle of the night. I hadn't swum to a canoe with a couple of steps in a canoe down to a room 30 feet long. I dreamed it. Was fast asleep. Now I'm dreaming in my bed. I have to wake up, I said. You're not asleep, he said. He was smiling at me. Come and dry off. He took my arm and led me through a doorway into a corridor, very long with many rooms. We were in a bathroom. The walls, the floor, the ceiling were of metal, but not of metal I'd ever seen. It shone softly a bluish green. So did the sunken bath and the shower. We stood on a grid beside the shower, and I felt immediately dry. The air didn't move, it was just dry, and so was I in a second. Minutes later, we were dressed, and I was seeing everything. I won't put it now. For now, I'll say I saw the sleeping quarters, the kitchen, the control room, and that ladder. And that later, we drank Tigra, and I felt marvelous. I felt wonderful. I knew I could jump any wall or dive impossible distances. I could fly. This is the Tigra, and I'll tell more later. I also knew we'd taken off. There was no sensation of movement. I just felt it earlier, that dizzy, fractional lurch. Nothing of what was happening was believable to me. It just kept happening very fast. I had no time to believe or disbelieve. Yet I hadn't stopped thinking. I thought, he's from another world. But even as I thought it, I knew it was mad. You couldn't come from other worlds. At school, we'd heard why. The fastest thing in the universe was light. It was the same speed as radio. To send a signal to the moon took 1.5 seconds. To the sun, it took 6 minutes. To the next star after the sun, 4.5 years. Just to signal a planet where there might be life would take 300 years. So how could there be flights of that distance, of that time? I knew there couldn't be. So I sat, not believing, not disbelieving, just nerving myself to ask the question. Finally I blurted, "Where are you from?" "From Egon," he said. "Is that another planet?" "Not another planet." "In outer space?" "Not outer," he said. "What do you mean, inner?" He laughed as my mouth dropped open and leaned over and patted me. He patted me like you pat a dog. "Inner space, Barry," he said. "There's a world below this world. There's a world under the sea. The real world. Egon, look," he said. We were in the main room at the low table, and he slid a panel from beneath and studied it. Then he pressed something, and I felt the tremor again, but now like a high-speed lift slowing. He pressed once more, and the room darkened, and the wall lit up. It took a moment to see that it wasn't the wall, but what was outside that had lit up. The wall had become transparent. Outside was the sea. It had lit up dimly, a dark, soupy color. I heard him muttering, and he did something else. And with a single giant flicker, the whole sea lit up. It lit up for miles. It was the most fantastic thing I'd ever seen. It was not like sea. It wasn't even like water. There was no motion, no waves. It was clear as air, a pale honey color, and everywhere there were mountains. Before I could take it in, it all went out. In the darkness, I heard him muttering again, then with a series of flickers, faster than sheet lightning, the whole world lit up, above, below, on all sides. We were poised in our chairs, and all the furniture poised with us, the entire structure of the boat transparent. Miles above, through the ceiling, the sky flashed and glittered like a skin of mercury. Far below, there was a vast winding valley. It was mottled like a lizard, and on both sides of it foothills sloped. Immense terrace cliffs rose from the foothills, their castle-like tops facing each other. There were canyons between the cliffs, and swarming in and out of them were millions of fish. There was an underbelly multitude of every color. The walls and terraces were of every color. Purple, green, tangerine. Ahead was a mountain range, and the nearest peak was shining turquoise. There was a forest on its crest. My mouth was opening and closing, and I looked at Dido and saw he'd not spared a glance for what was outside. He was studying the panel. He said, "Yes, there." And I looked where he pointed. Beyond the turquoise mountain, far in the distance, soared 3 slender peaks. He pressed the panel and we moved. There was only the faintest lurch, but now I saw how fast we move. The cliffs began hurtling past. The speckled valley unraveled like knitting wool. In seconds, the 3 peaks were dead ahead, and he slowed the boat. From a range of maybe 10 miles, they stood weirdly alone, towering pinnacles rising abruptly from the ocean bed like a cathedral. "Now you'll see," Dido said, and we began to rise. We rose gently, closing slightly with the pinnacles as we went up the length of them. We rose 1 mile, 2 miles, 3, and all the time the pinnacles continued straight up. Then the boat slowed to a stop, and we broke the surface into a fine summer's day. Everywhere the sun glittered. Where the pinnacles had been, there was land. In the distance, 4 or 5 miles, was just a flat green surface. It was just a flat green smudge. At this distance, 4 or 5 miles, it was just a flat green smudge. "I can't get closer," Dido said. He twisted a control, and it came closer. It did it in a series of jumps, as if the transparent wall had become a lens. The green smudge enlarged to a stretch of coast, then a beach, then a portion of a beach. People were sunning and swimming from the beach. There were trees behind, and streets and buildings. I could actually see a policeman directing traffic in the street, and behind him a building, and on the building a flag. It was a British flag. "Where are we?" I said. "Bermuda. But we were in England only minutes ago." "That's not the point," he shook his head. "It's just a mountaintop. Your whole world is mountaintops. You're mountain dwellers. Do you want to go to the other world, Barry? Below the abyss?" The way he said it scared me. I said nothing. He leaned across and touched my forehead. Again, the swift headache came and went. "You want to go to the other world, Barry?" he said. "Yes," I said. "You want to go to Egon, below the abyss?" "Yes." "Of course you do. I knew it," he said and laughed, and we began the descent. I know now that he did what he wanted with me. He put into my mind what he wanted me to know, and took out of it what he wanted me to forget. I forgot my clothes left in the cave and the flashlight still switched on there. I forgot I had to get back. And all I had to get back to, my home, my parents, Sarah and Annie. I forgot all that. I forgot who I was. Of the descent, all I knew is that presently, cocking his head, he said, "Now we're at it. The glister deep." "What is it?" "The way through the abyss. We're going in. You're too sleepy to see it, Barry." "I'm not," I said. "I want to see it." "You feel like asleep." I don't want to sleep." "You do," Dido said, and leaned forward and touched me, and I passed into the other world, sleeping. And that's the end of part 1.